Go for it.
Another item you mentioned, Ken, was property. Now, there's some things to think about with property, because anybody in the real estate industry, or most people in the real estate industry, will tell you about FIRPTA, which is a withholding tax that occurs when you sell your real estate. So if we're talking about bringing in a Canadian person buying U.S. real estate, we might put them. We would also probably put the real estate in a C corporate structure. And what that will give us is the advantage of being able to sell the U.S. property and just pay tax on the capital gains of that property, and not pay FIRPTA and not pay not pay any FIRPTA on it. So provided that the real estate is completely sold. So and then afterwards we would liquidate the C Corp U.S. entity. So those are some of the structures I advise on. And if somebody's older, then and they might have some estate tax issues as well, so we might add another foreign corporation that owns the U.S. real estate if we're worried about C corporation. And again, this is not something that's commonly known, and there's like a lot of things to discuss. And as to why am I saying this and not that, and so it just takes a bit of a deep dive with clients to really help them understand. But these are some of the basic ideas in inbound structuring that I get involved in.
Well, that was very helpful, Dennis. First, by the way, how does someone get a hold of you? That's probably pretty important.
Sure. Well, I have a website. My firm is called turquoisetax.com, turquoisetax.com. My phone is 847-533-7930, or I can be reached in my email, which is DENIZ, that's my first name, Dennis. Sounds like Dennis, but it's Dennis, at turquoisetax.com. So those are, or you can talk to Ken, and Ken will send you over.
Yep, good point. You can go to our website, vastsolutionsgroup.com, or you can email me, which my email is kenner@vastsolutionsgroup.com. Again, KENNER at vastsolutionsgroup.com. Okay, so then let's talk brass tacks. So let's just say someone has, I don't know, they're a resident of Canada and they have $1 million property, income producing property. Let's say it's commercial, it doesn't matter. And let's say you advise them. Let's say that's a typical arrangement for some of our clients. What do you charge? I know you're going to say it depends, but what is a typical engagement for you, and what does that look like?
Well, that's a good question. It's a bit of a moving target, and let's say I'm doing just strictly compliance work, and I'm not really thinking about this structuring and planning, and I'm just producing the necessary tax returns. That can be a little bit cheaper. When I'm doing when I'm giving a tax advice, I'm required by the IRS as a practicing tax advisor to look at all of the issues. So we need to kind of have a bit of a budget there to have time to really uncover all of the taxpayers' concerns, because if it's just being held for a quick capital gain, it's one structure. If they're young, it's another structure. If they're older, it's another structure. If they're doing this for purposes of rental income, if they're trying to create businesses in the U.S., it could be different structures. So, it sort of varies. I would, my rate, which is pretty comparable for international tax, is generally around $400 an hour. But I try to, let's say we do something very bare bones. I mean, could I get through that structuring, advising in a few hours? Maybe if they weren't looking for written tax advice. But then if they say, give me a memo on that, because there's a lot of money at stake, then that becomes more than just a few hours. So it just depends on what the client is telling me, that, what kind of assurance they need, what's their comfort level. Some people will take, some people are like, I'll do a structuring sometimes where, somebody's like, I'm really bare boned, and I'm like, okay, we just got this conversation. I'm not going to give you written tax advice.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to know that. And then it tends to go pretty quickly, but we get into some complex topics. So a lot of times they go, wait a second, Dan, what did you mean by that, and why? Or maybe they have business partners and that, or something like that, or there's a lot of money at stake. And it's like, at that point, like, I'm just not allowed by the IRS to just shoot through it like a back of a napkin.
Yeah,
And
I think
so,
you added a lot of value. I think a lot of people don't realize that there's some international tax is very complex, and people don't realize sometimes that's the case and think, oh, I can do it. I can just do a tax return on my own. But there's some implications. Plus, you've already, I think, shared some ways that you can lower tax liability legally, ethically, and morally just during this small little session that we've been together thus far.
yeah, it's I like to ski, and I look at it like, for some people, skiing is the bunny hill, and it's like, wow, this is really easy. And then for other people, you're on the rocks, and you're doing some backcountry skiing, and this is kind of like a backcountry skiing thing where it's like, this is very different than what the people on the bunny hill are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it makes sense. I mean, people might say, "Oh, 400 is a lot," but really, if you could save someone, I'm making up a number, $2,000 in 1 hour, as an example, just pretending. I mean, there's value there. There's no doubt about that. So, how about this? Why not throw out one case study, because we only have a couple minutes left. I don't want to take all your time. One case study where you've completely helped an entrepreneur, let's say a solopreneur, because a lot of our clients are solopreneurs, where you've completely helped the solopreneur clean up a mess and maybe even save a couple of pennies as far as their tax dollars. Give us one case study.
Well, I want to kind of talk about something that's going to be a little bit on the domestic side, but I'm going to talk about what are the big dollars involved. So I was involved in a U.S. S corporation that spun out a partnership entity, and that entity was the partnership was being acquired by a transaction in an acquisition, and because it was that they created a partnership entity, we couldn't use the C corporation tax laws, and so what I advised is to structure it in a C corporation. And the reason that I'm bringing this up and not talking about international tax is because I essentially saved the client $4 million on the acquisition.
Whoa, I like that.
And so on the international side, there's a lot of it can be, so it just kind of depends on the transaction. You can see that kind of work on the international side if it's today I had a client who it was created a German holding company. They would have ordinarily paid about 30% in taxes, and through a German structure, I brought them down to 9% locally in Germany. And then they did what's kind of called a check the box election. And so they, at least for the first 100,000, they're not paying any U.S. tax on it. So, those are some of the things on the smaller clients. But, those are and that gives you a broad brush of what I do. There's some mergers and acquisitions work. There's some structuring work. And then there's also just the routine, get the freaking tax return out the door. And I'm doing that work as well. So for these clients, and they have unique forms that, it's not only complex on the planning side, but on the form side, there's forms that people that are tricky and complicated, and a lot of CPAs will, who are very good practicing CPAs on the US side, but they'll say, I can't fill out this form, and if I do, I'm going to take big exposure. So Dennis, can you do it for me? And I will work with their US CPAs to provide that support as well.
Mm-hmm. I understand. Holy Mark, do you do any let's say we had I keep thinking Canadian or Mexican client. Do you do free consultations for 15 minutes, just kind of learn the story, or how does that engagement work?
So sure, like most practitioners, I'll say, let's just say like the first half hour, we can just kind of talk about my practice. We can talk about some general ideas. I can tell them if I see an issue that's going to be complicated and needs to be addressed, or they've got something pretty routine, and I can pretty quickly suss that out if I'm seeing something complicated, and then at the end of the half hour, they go, okay, Dennis, can you start fixing the problem? Well, then we get into kind of more of an advisory role, and I would probably need some engagement letters or something like that. But I've been known to be overly generous too. But it's because this is something that has taken me actually decades to learn. It's just a really complicated area. There was a professor who did a research study of the 40 fields of law, and said the second most difficult field of law outside of running all the agencies in Washington, D.C. is taxation. And within that field of taxation, I want to say, I think I'm biased, of course, but I want to say international tax is the most challenging. I think partnerships is very challenging as well, but I really think that there's more complexities dealing with all the different countries. And so yeah, it's not something, they're paying for somebody who has done this for a long time. We're not talking about a 2-year manager who's sharp as anything, but he just can't learn it that quickly. So yeah, and that's what I bring to that.
Yeah, I think you bring a lot to the table. I really appreciate you spending the time on this. I mean, more than anything, it's pretty funny that you saved until basically the end, saying I've saved a client $4 million. And I think that's something our listeners and viewers really have to take into account when they're thinking $400 is a lot of money. In the whole scheme of things, I'll pay $400 or whatever, $20,000 if you can save me $4 million.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. Yeah. And if you don't have those really complex areas, then it doesn't end up costing as much, and sure, there's less savings. It's still expensive, but it's not, it's not crazy. So,
I totally get it. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time, but once again, my name's Kenneth French. I'm with vastsolutionsgroup.com, and it's been a pleasure. And really, if anyone has any questions, Dennis already provided his information. You have our email address. We really appreciate you taking the time to spend some time with us here today. And to the listeners and viewers, thank you very much for spending the time listening to our content. Hopefully it's been valuable and you've saved some money and or made some money from it.